Top of the morning to you. It is a beautiful, balmy 39 degrees out here in never sunny Northern California. It's a beautiful Tuesday. It's supposed to start raining again in about an hour, maybe two. But for now, we have a nice, mostly dry pavement, and we've got a couple dogs who are happy to be walking in relative warmth and dryness. I'm of course still wearing rain gear because I've been caught out here one too many times when it wasn't supposed to be raining and then it did. So fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I want to talk this morning a little bit more about free speech. It seems that every time I turn around, people shove their heads up their asses when I start talking about free speech. In the US, free speech has become somewhat synonymous with the First Amendment, but I don't use them interchangeably. The First Amendment just guarantees that the state won't take away your right to freedom of speech. It doesn't, however, encompass freedom of speech in its entirety. The Founding Fathers recognized that free speech is important. And when they were crafting the Constitution, since that dealt with the federal government and the federal government's relationship with the people in the Bill of Rights, they put in there a restriction against the federal government taking away your freedom of speech. Most countries recognize freedom of speech as some sort of an inherent right. It's a human right. Without freedom of speech, things tend to go a little bit sideways. You get oppression. You get a lot of subversive, statist elements. It fosters hate. It fosters discontent. For example, when they shut down, so they call it Freedom's Channel, when YouTube did they have the right to? Yeah. But does that make it right? Well, that's a good question. What are they going to accomplish by doing that? Do you think that the people who followed, so they call it Freedom's Channel, stopped believing what they believe in? Do you think that channel made them into who they are? Or were they already who they are and just looking for like-minded people to agree with? He goes on and makes a new site. And that new site, Hate the State. All those old people are going to find him there. Oh, we got the wrap up going on. All right, unwrapped. All those same people are going to find him there. Hasn't changed anybody's minds. Nobody will be able to change their minds if we keep banning Ian. Because if we keep banning him, the people will go with him. They won't be there in a nice consolidated little spot where like-minded people, or where people who are against the particular perspectives that Ian has might be able to talk to them, reason with them. What happened when, what the hell is that thing? It was a white nationalist publication. There was an online white nationalist publication. I forget the name of it, but it was banned. It was actually deplatformed off of the internet. It was deplatformed off the internet. It wasn't hosted by, no country would host it. They couldn't get, I think, funding from people, if I remember correctly. What happened to them? Last I heard, they were on the dark web. They were still online. People can still get to them, but reasonable people can get to them. So reasonable people don't know what's going on, so reasonable people can't address it. Reasonable people can't formulate arguments against what's being said. It turned it into a further echo chamber where it continues to harden the hearts and minds of the people who believe that shit. And if you think that just being able or being willing to talk to these people is something that isn't effective, I beg to differ. There is a very popular story about a black man who engaged with, befriended, talked to members of the KKK. And in doing so, he got them out of that, because it's really hard to think that all black people are bad if you know a really cool black dude. It makes it almost impossible to stay racist, or at least it cracks a wedge into it. It makes you think, well, you know, maybe not all. Hashtag not all. So freedom of speech is important, but the First Amendment isn't the end all and be all of it. States can and do have their own statutes. They have their own constitutions that protect freedom of speech. And the FCC, as terrible of an idea as the FCC is, can and has protected freedom of speech. It's not doing so good of a job right now, but it can. And I think my biggest deal with people who are against free speech, the people who think it is or should be okay to deplatform people, like, so they call it freedom, is that the rationale is basically, I don't like him, he's an asshole, he does mean things, he says mean words, he makes people upset, and therefore we should remove him. Well, I don't know if you've been listening to the news lately, but it seems like everybody can get upset over everything. I mean, if people are calling a wall racist, wanting to build a wall racist, just the mere fact that there is a wall on our border, on a border that we know people are crossing illegally, where we know people are running drugs, they're running sex slaves, they're doing all sorts of terrible things in addition to just entering illegally, and somehow building a wall is racist. People can find just about anything offensive. And so you applying your standard, well, that's reasonable. But someone else applying their standard, you might not think is so reasonable. In fact, if someone else applies their standard to you, all of a sudden you might be the person getting deplatformed. And so you should really think about that. You know, if whatever standard for censorship you set today, it's like a 35 mile an hour speed limit. If 35 miles an hour is good, why not 34? What's really the difference between 35 and 34? No one's going to notice it. I mean, come on. Look at how many lives you could save. Why not 33? Why not 32? That's the thing with censorship, is if they could find a justification for someone who's really super terrible bad, then they'll find the next person down, because all of a sudden that super terrible bad person is gone. So he's not the worst thing on the platform anymore. He's not the worst thing on the internet. They got rid of Stormfront. That's what it was called. Stormfront was the white nationalist online. I don't know if you call it I don't know what you call it. It's an online website. I don't know if it's a web magazine or whatever, but it was a white nationalist one, and they got rid of it. And all of a sudden, Stormfront wasn't the worst thing on the internet. And then they got rid of Alex Jones. He's not the worst thing, because he was the worst thing on the internet then. And they're just narrowing down the window of acceptability, because people like to be outraged. People like to be victims, and they look for that. They look for that thing to be offended by. It's fun and exciting to be offended. And they get to use it for their little victim bucks. And they look at the worst thing on the internet and they say, this is bad. We can all agree this is bad. It's so much worse. We're not trying to take anything else away, but look at this. This is just bad. And if you cave and you say, yes, that is bad, let's get rid of it. That's no longer the worst thing on the internet anymore. But then they point to the next thing that is now the worst thing on the internet. It's what we're seeing. It's what we're seeing going on. Wave after wave of people and ideas being kicked off the internet, deplatformed, taking money away, taking funding away, taking the ability to be funded. It's pretty stupid. It's just the same thing as I don't know, expecting that as soon as you get rid of Stormfront, that all of a sudden people aren't going to be racist anymore. People were racist before Stormfront. Racist people created Stormfront. People will be racist after Stormfront. They'll just find a new place to be racist. And if you make it so that you can't tell who the racists are, how do you know who to target? If you're that black guy who befriended the KKK, how would you know who to talk to? How would you know where to spend your efforts to convince racists not to be racist anymore? Anyway, my point was that freedom of speech is and should be a right that's greater than just the First Amendment. And to say that YouTube has the right to censor people, well, I think they're legally allowed to, but I don't think they should be. I think they should be treated like a utility, like the power company, like the water company. Just because the power company or the water company doesn't like you or doesn't like what you're saying doesn't mean that they could turn off your services. Oh, he's racist. I'm not going to give him water. I'm not going to give him electricity. He's a racist. He thinks the wrong things. I think the internet should be like that. I think especially the social media platforms like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, I think they should be like that. I think they should be like that precisely for the same reasons why the founding fathers thought freedom of speech was important. Why they prevented the federal government from taking away rights to free speech. Anyway, I hope I've made that clear. Notice nowhere in there did I say that YouTube couldn't take his stuff down. I said they shouldn't. I said it should be made illegal, unlawful for them to censor. Notice I'm not just talking about the First Amendment, I'm talking about the entire principle of freedom of speech. And I know I'm going to get idiots in here who can't fucking comprehend English, who are going to say, but the First Amendment is only about the government. Yeah, I guess that's true. The First Amendment is only about the government. You got me, kids. You got me. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great morning.